And now for our last but not least workshop. It's the title is Crowdfunding Launch Formula, and it'll be presented by Chris Blauvelt, who's the founder and CEO of LaunchGood. And LaunchGood was last year's winner of the $10,000 prize for the Entrepreneur Showcase. And Chris will teach us how to bring your idea or project, how to harness the power of crowdfunding. Chris?
Steal my stuff.
Yes. Stage is yours.
Okay, I think this is working now. Assalamu alaikum. Raise your hand if you were here 2 years ago. Oh wow, a lot of people. Raise your hand if you have heard of LaunchGood. Raise your hand if you've donated on LaunchGood. Oh, thank you very much. It really means a lot to me. I'm here with my co-founder, Manny Kalawe. And LaunchGood.com, we are the crowdfunding platform for Muslims worldwide. As mentioned, we were here 2 years ago. I still have that hat and jacket, but I lost my LaunchGood shirt, which is a shame. And what's interesting is 2 years ago when I came here, it was a very special moment. We got a round of applause for breaking the $1 million mark on our platform. And in 2 years, we've really been blessed to grow 10x. And I really want to thank AMCC. This is an incredible event. It really helped our startup, and I think what you see them doing is really building that ecosystem for entrepreneurs. So thank you, AMCC. Crowdfunding. If you forget everything else, please remember this. Crowdfunding is storytelling. So I'm going to tell you a story. Anyone want to know how long I've been Muslim? How long? Since high school, 15 years. And I became Muslim in 2001, just before 9/11. So you can imagine 3 months later, when the attack happened in New York, my life was flipped upside down. And it sent me on a journey to really learn more about Islam, make sure I didn't make a mistake. And I discovered that, subhanAllah, Islam is an amazing religion. And Muslims really are amazing people. I traveled all over the world, and I love Muslims. And I wanted to change the perception of Muslims. And I went into film. Some of you may remember that. My first AMCC I ever attended, I was actually a film producer with Bilal's stand. And we needed to raise money at one point after we got into Sundance. And I had a friend from New York that's like, hey, check out this new website called Kickstarter. Raise your hand if you heard of Kickstarter. One of the largest crowdfunding platforms. And we did a Kickstarter. I was one of the first Muslims, maybe the first Muslim to use Kickstarter. Alhamdulillah, we raised over $20,000. And my mind was blown. Because if you've ever raised money before for the arts or film, it's very difficult. There's no money out there. And all of a sudden, crowdfunding came along and opened up this whole new market. But what's really special is opened minds. So, for example, there's a guy in Michigan, his name is Tony Fidel. Anyone know who Tony Fidel is? What's that? Founder, he's actually he's the founder of Nest. And before that, he's actually the guy that invented the iPod. And he came up with the idea of the iPod, and this was like, 20 years ago. And how can he get it to market? Well, he used to get a meeting with Steve Jobs, and he really finagled his way, got in front of Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs bought the idea. He worked for Apple, and the rest is history. And that's how it was. If you had a great idea 20 years ago, you'd have to go find Steve Jobs. But today, because of things like Kickstarter, we have this revolution or this renaissance of I call it garage entrepreneurship, where anyone can launch ideas. And I was like, this is exactly what the Muslim community needs. Because we always look at ourselves as victims and not agents of change. And so crowdfunding is actually, to me, much more about telling stories and changing the mindset of the community that anything is possible if we work together. So, crowdfunding market, it's huge, or as Bernie would say, huge, right? $34 billion, just look at the circles, they get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? 100% growth on average per year, and it's predominantly in the Western markets right now, but the World Bank is expecting it by 2025 to be over $100 billion in developing markets. What is it? It's an age-old concept. Taxes are crowdfunding, right? But it's forced. Well, crowdfunding today is online. It's people donating to a cause they care about. Great example on LaunchGood, our probably most famous campaign ever, Muslims United for San Bernardino, started by Dr. Faisal Qazi and also Tariq al-Masidi right here. That had an initial goal of $10,000. It went viral and collected over $200,000 from over 2,000 people all across the world. So why should you crowdfund? You want to launch something that's very specific, it's very defined and tangible, and you want to build a community around it. You also want to reduce your risk. So you have an idea for a great product. Well, you don't know if it's worth $1 million or investing hundreds of thousands, even $1 million into putting that product to market. You can test it through crowdfunding. If people like it, they're going to buy it. And it's accessible. Anyone, anywhere in the world can do it. This is great in the Muslim community because, unfortunately, half of our community tends to be very disenfranchised, like women, right? They can't just go in front of a masjid and start fundraising. It's not that easy, but it is when it's online. What are the types of crowdfunding? There are 4 main types. And there's a lot more than this, and Tilt is a great example. Tilt is one of the largest crowdfunding platforms in the world and doesn't exactly fall into any of these 4. But the 4 main ones are donation, so people want to support a cause. This is like LaunchGood does a lot of this. GoFundMe is known for this. And most of the goals are pretty small. If you see here, $100 to $100,000. The next one is pre-sale. So Kickstarter is very famous for this. We also do this on LaunchGood. And this is where people are bringing a product to market. Example, we did this on LaunchGood was our very first campaign ever, which was Naduna. Raise your hand if you heard of Naduna. Yeah, she's a local, well, her partner Zainab is local in New York. And they raised over $18,000 on LaunchGood to bring a DVD to light. The next one is debt. So debt is very interesting. It's actually the largest type of crowdfunding, which people don't often realize, but that's more like lending. And Kiva, if you've heard of Kiva, that's a good example. There's a Muslim version of Kiva called Narwi, which is in beta right now. And the incentive usually is just to help people. Give a few $100s to a single mother in India that she could buy a sewing machine and start her own business. But even that field's changing. And the last one is equity. And so this is what I imagine a lot of people here are interested in. A huge opportunity in equity crowdfunding, a lot of challenges as well. But this allows people to raise money through investment. And one of my friends in Singapore, his name's Omar Munshi, he's the founder of ethiscrowd.com. It's really cool. You actually invest. They take your money and build houses in Indonesia, and they give you about a 10% return on average per year with very low risk. And you're building communities and providing housing to people in need in Indonesia. So that's a really cool platform I encourage you to check out. But these are the main types. Donation and pre-sale are LaunchGood. We don't do debt or equity, but those are 2 other big types. There will be time for Q&A at the end. So what's the key idea to crowdfunding? It's not showing. Here it is. Okay, the key idea is the crowd comes before funding. In the word literally crowdfunding, right? The word crowd comes first. It's social. If you're going to crowdfunding just because you need money, you shouldn't be doing crowdfunding, okay? And if you don't have a social network, you probably will not do well in crowdfunding. So it's social. You need to have a network, and ultimately it should be about publicity. Really, you want to make a statement. An example of that is, let's say your masjid wants to raise, $100,000 for a new roof. You could do a fundraising dinner, bring Imam Siraj Wahaj, and probably pull it off, right? No? Yes? You guys just raised like $1.5 million for Zaytuna here, right? I'm sure you could pull off $100,000 with Imam Siraj. But it won't do that well online. It's not emotional. And so, and because it's not emotional, it's not social. And so the key ingredients, if you're doing crowdfunding, just 2 things. You gotta be legit and it's gotta be emotional. So if you can cover those 2, you can do well. And if you can hit hard upon the emotion, you can do very well. So let's go back to the example with San Bernardino. Who launched that campaign? Does anyone remember the name of the person? Tariq, who launched it? Faisal, Dr. Faisal Qazi. He has a clinic in San Bernardino. He's like and he did it through his nonprofit that's been working in the community for years. So he's like the most legitimate guy from our community to do it. And on top of that, he launched the campaign even before they identified the shooters. It wasn't even knowing they were Muslim at the time, but it was his community and he wanted to help them. And so the timing of it really fed into the motion and it just took off. Here's another case study. This is Rafiq and Friends. Did anyone support Rafiq and Friends here? Wow, all right. Few people saw it. Thank you. Thank you, Miriam. Did you enjoy it? Did you get your little nakhla? Love it. Okay, great. So there's a video here. I don't think we're going to have time to watch it, but you can look it up on your phones, launchgood.com/Rafiq. And this was a Ramadan activity set. It came with a book, cards for something to do every day of Ramadan, a little plate to put dates on that your kid could eat, and finally a stuffed animal, the date palm. His name is Rafiq. And they did this because Justin and Fatima, my friends in California, when they asked their nieces and nephews what their favorite holiday of the year was, what do you think they said? Christmas. Some said Halloween. Some said Eid. And they said, which Eid? And then they said, Christmas Eid. Right? So they're like, this is a problem. We got to fix this. And they did it, and it was amazing. Like, this is a real product. And it showed up at my house like a month after the campaign ended. And now my daughter goes to sleep every day with, she calls Rafiq nakhla, but she goes to bed every day with nakhla. And in the process, what did I tell you? It's about publicity. So they actually had the secret here, and I don't know if they'd be okay with me saying this, but I'm going to say it. They actually had all the money. They didn't need to do crowdfunding. They had all the money in place, but they wanted to do crowdfunding to leverage their risk and build publicity, and they ended up getting over 500 people to donate from all across the world. They got covered by NPR and many other news sources. So really the crowdfunding for them, is great to get that financial boost and double their goal, but it was really about publicity. So good and bad crowdfunding. At this point, a lot of this stuff should be obvious or maybe even redundant. If you're raising money for operating funds, not such a great idea. But if it's specific, wonderful. Is Dustin still here? Dustin Cron? Okay, I'm gonna tell an embarrassing story about him. He came to us with Wide when it first started to do a campaign. And I love Wide and I love Dustin. He's my brother from another mother. But it was like, help fund Wide. And I'm like, it's just, what is it? It's nothing. He's like, don't worry, I got Imam Zayd doing a video, and I got big network, and we got subscribers, and he had a $15,000 goal, or maybe even $12,000 goal, and he launched, and it did nothing. I think it raised like $1,000. And I'm like, what are you trying to raise money for? He's like, well, I need writers. I can't just keep getting volunteers. Like, I need to pay people. So I said, focus on that. Make this about the writers. So Dustin is a brand marketing genius. He rebranded it as the Malcolm X Global Digital Fellowship. And he was going to fund 3 fellows to write for Wide. And it knocked it out of the park. Same campaign, same video with Imam Zayd, same fundraising goal, but a totally specific focus that people could relate to. And that's what you need to do. Again, you should be about more than just money. You should have a modest goal. You will see crowdfunding campaigns that raise hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, but those are the exception. Typically, it's going to be, even the San Bernardino, what was its original goal? $10,000. It ended up raising, mashallah, $208,000, but its original goal was actually just $10,000. You should have a social network in place. For example, San Bernardino is doing well. Tarek partnered, and he's got an amazing network with Celebrate Mercy, mashallah, and it just exploded, right? So social network matters. You should try to collaborate, and you should be on a team. It's typically you raise twice as much money when you work on a team. This is what a typical crowdfunding page looks like. I'm not going to go through it all. You put a video in, you set a goal, you set a deadline, you offer rewards, or you do giving levels. If you have questions about the specifics, come see me afterwards. The reality of crowdfunding, this is important. Less than 10% of projects hit their goal, okay? Crowdfunding is hard. There is not this, army of millions of people just throwing money away online. Like, that's not how it works. It's hard. And it's crazy. 80% of your funds come in first and last 3 days. When I did my Blauvelt crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter, we had a goal of $18,000, and we were $10,000 short with 3 days to go. So over 50% of our goal to reach. And in those last 3 days, we ended up raising $14,000. So a lot of people, we know Muslims, we love to procrastinate, wait till last minute, right? So you can't quit. It's going to be crazy. You got to be prepared for that. And it's everyone. So let's look at the San Bernardino campaign again. $200,000 from about 2,000 people, a little more than 2,000 people. So your average donation is like $100. But we had one person gave $50,000. So one person represented like 0.1% of the total donors, less than that actually, like 0.05% of the total donors, but he represented 25% of the money given. And so when you're crowdfunding, you need to get a lot of people involved, but that includes the rich people. But what I say about it, it's not the best analogy with Muslims. Okay, I got time for this one. It's kind of like, it works actually, I'm going to do this. My wife's Lebanese. They do this thing called debka or debki, depending on what culture you're from. So they do the debki where they're all dancing. And the thing is, like at every wedding, there's like one or two like cousins that are like really good at debki. Like they can like fly up in there and click their heels and stuff. They don't want to be out on the debki floor if they're the only ones doing it. That's like your rich donor, right? So you want to get that guy that gives you $50,000. He's not going to be the first in. But if he sees that this is a party, that it's happening, that his contribution is going to matter, he's going to be flying. The same thing with donors, right? You want to get the big donors involved, get a lot of small donors. Get as many small donors as you can so people know it's a party and then they want to be part of it. Last thing, crowdfunding is not rocket science. I once knew a sister, she had a very complicated Twitter and Facebook ad algorithm to get all these donations and this and that. And then like last day of her campaign, she was like still over 50% short of her goal. And she just started making phone calls. And you know what? That was it. She just needed to do one day of phone calls and she raised all of her money. It's really not hard. If I send you an email blast, it's so easy to say no to that. If I send you a text message, it's pretty easy to ignore. If I send you a Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, it's a little more difficult because I know if you read it, so you might feel a little guilty. But if I ask you, like Miriam, we have a campaign for Standing Rock. Have you donated to it? Do you mind if you just gave like $1 today to Standing Rock? Thank you so much. It's launchgood.com/standingrock. I look forward to your donation. It's not easy to ask. I make it look easy because I smile, but it's not easy. Is it easy to say no? No, it's hard. So it's not, Muslims, mashallah, we're very humble people. We're very shy sometimes to ask. We don't want to be perceived as begging. But if you believe in the cause and it's good, and Standing Rock is a good cause, you shouldn't be afraid to ask for good. And so, secrets to success, number one thing is be passionate. You don't have to make the best video, you don't have to have the best product, but if you're passionate, you'll find a way to be successful, inshallah. Work as a team. It's, as I mentioned, teams raise twice as much as solo projects. Prepare. 2 weeks is the minimum, with one exception. What's the exception? Tarek, you know. Exception is flash campaigns. Like, if something happens today, don't wait, like, okay, we got 2 weeks to do, no. Like, Tarek and I always work on these flash campaigns, like, minutes count. Like, it's like, we got to get this out in the next, 3 minutes. It really matters. But in general, you should prepare. Spend a long time preparing. Rafiq and friends, they spent 6 weeks preparing. Be emotional, not logical. I learned a really interesting thing, is that if you gave an envelope with a story of a girl in Africa who was starving, and you gave an envelope with stats of kids starving in Africa, people are much more likely to donate to the girl versus the stats. We all know that. If you put the stats inside the envelope with the girl, like to back up just how that her story is just one of thousands that need support, it actually decreases donations. Why? Because you start engaging the logic of people. Don't do it, just avoid the logic. Just make it emotional. And then never quit. I mentioned that most of your funds come at the end. You can't give up. if you're getting the word out, you got to trust that it's going to pay off. And last thing is have fun. Crowdfunding can be exhausting. It can be depressing when you see Miriam didn't donate to Standing Rock like she said she would, or your best friends didn't support your campaign. And so try to have fun in the process. There's a lot of cool stuff that happens with crowdfunding. It's a great excuse to talk to people who you'd never get a chance to talk to normally. As an example of that, one of my friends, Khadija Lardis, she has a nonprofit called Rahma, reaching all HIV-positive Muslims. Somehow it works to spell Rahma, in America. And when she did her crowdfunding campaign with us, she just started reaching out to Muslim billionaires on LinkedIn. And one of them was like, I want to fund you for the next 5 years. So fun things happen with crowdfunding if you embrace it. And last thing, if you're going to do crowdfunding, we definitely invite you to LaunchGood. We see LaunchGood as a storybook of all the great things Muslims are doing in the world and capable of doing. It's crowdfunding can be scary, but with us it's not, because we assign a personal coach to you. We're the only crowdfunding platform that'll do that every campaign gets a coach. Here's some of our team members. We're 12 people in 5 countries now, and it's very simple. You just go to LaunchGood, submit a project, we pair you up your coach, and then you start raising funds. Questions?
And there's a mic here for your questions. Please come to the mic if you have any questions. And can I start with a question? Can you use crowdfunding for a just proof of concept to make sure that your product idea is a valid one and that there are enough people interested in it?
Yeah, it's actually one of the most popular ways to use crowdfunding commercially is exactly that. And it's great. I'm going to give you an example, not from LaunchGood. It's from Kickstarter. Has anyone heard of the Coolest Cooler? How much did they raise? Do you know? Okay, their goal was $50,000. They raised $13 million. Now, something interesting about that campaign, it was their second attempt. Because the first time, they failed. Now imagine that. They couldn't even raise $50,000 the first time, and they relaunched 6 months later and got $13 million. You know what was different? One, the weather. So they launched their first campaign in like November. People aren't thinking about coolers, right? I told you crowdfunding is emotional, not logical. They were being logical. They're like, okay, it's going to take us 6 months to produce this, so if this gets funded now, the coolers will be ready by next summer, which makes sense. But in November, no one cares about coolers. It's cold. So that was their first mistake. The second thing was people gave feedback. Their first cooler was gray. And they're like, it'd be much better if it was orange. Again, it's an emotional thing. It doesn't affect the performance. It's orange versus gray. And then they got some other feedback like, hey, if you could put a blender on it, it would be really neat. And so they made a couple tweaks to the design based off feedback. And then the third thing was their network. So when they launched, they had zero kind of social network in place the first time. Well, the second time, they had about 1,000 backers the first time that wanted the product, but it didn't hit its goal, that were ready to support them and be their advocates from day one. So it's a great lesson. Another great lesson from that Kickstarter Coolest Cooler is they totally botched the delivery, and there are like tens of thousands of people that still not received their cooler today. It's been a disaster. So you also need to be very realistic. Like they said the cooler is going to be $400, but when they actually started building it, they realized it's $1,000 a cooler, and they were like they're hemorrhaging money. So a lot of lessons in that campaign.
I'd like to just interrupt and remind everyone to please vote for your favorite entrepreneur. Please vote in the next 3 minutes because the winner will be announced shortly, and the audience favorite as well will be announced in 5 minutes.
Yes, Chris, you said you was going to talk about crowdfunding for non-for-profit. I just want you to try to touch base on that. Then another thing is, there is a mosque in Maryland, An-Nur Masjid. The mosque got burnt, and the community, they're going through serious trauma to rebuild the mosque.
Wow.
So I prayed there last week Friday, and the imam was so emotional that now winter is coming. Now they would pray almost in the garage
Wow, subhanAllah.
behind. And every Friday they realize like 500 or 300 sometimes. But it's very difficult for people to bring out money, even though the imam was very emotional and trying to encourage people to donate to the cause of Allah. So I'm thinking in my mind that how can how can we help to...
So that's a very good question. I think you and I should talk after this and brainstorm. It's very specific, but it's a good question about nonprofit and crowdfunding. The thing I want to say about nonprofit and crowdfunding is whether people donate or not is dependent on your pitch. So like, could you sell them on the pitch? But then giving levels help dictate the level of donation. And what I mean by giving levels is like, what's $10, $25, $50, $100, things like that. Now, when you're selling a product, it's really easy. Like Naduna with her DVD, it was $35 gets you a DVD. What do you do with a mosque? Relate it to impact. Donors don't want, like, I don't want any more t-shirts. I have too many t-shirts. I don't want any more coffee mugs. But let me know what impact my donation is. What is $25 going to accomplish? Maybe $25 pays for 1 square foot of renovation. And then you can just scale it. You say $100 pays for 4 square feet of renovation. Or maybe you're doing an iftar program and $30 pays for dinner for 5 people. You have to communicate the impact of your donation. That's what donors want to see.
Assalamu alaikum. First of all, Chris, I want to thank you and your team. They've done an amazing job with LaunchGood. And the brother who was talking who helped with Bayana earlier, talked about the importance of lists. So I just want to say that LaunchGood, even if you have a starting idea, can help you build that list in the very beginning stages. But the question I have is, how valuable is the LaunchGood network versus Kickstarter versus the other platforms? And do you have any analytics that show, because you said the easiest way is just to call your friends and your own network to give money, but how valuable is the network in exposing your campaign to people who probably would have never heard of it unless they were on LaunchGood?
That's a really good question. So LaunchGood's network is about 70,000 people now. I should have less than 15 minutes. I should have 5 minutes. 5. Yeah. Sorry, I got it, Reem. I got it. There you go. So one of the nice things about LaunchGood, it is that very concentrated network. And we're not that big of a volume. We have about 100 projects live right now. So when we see a project that really matters, not only are we able to get our coaches to coach them to success, thank you, Saad. But if it's really worthy, we can put it in our newsletter and start driving traffic, and that really helps. And that's one of the biggest advantages of LaunchGood is that within the bigger crowdfunding sites that have thousands of projects live, you're just noise. And we can actually turn you into the signal in LaunchGood. But beyond that, one of the things that we really try to do in LaunchGood is connect people. So Justin and Fatima, when they did their book project, we connected them to Megan Wyatt, who did a book project with us before, and other authors. Because we're actually trying to build ecosystems within LaunchGood, like a writer's ecosystem and a charity ecosystem. And that's a really important for our community to develop is internal ecosystems. And then the stats were up there somewhere, but there we go, mashallah. So, alhamdulillah, it's, on average, we raise more than the other platforms. Our unfair advantage is we assign a coach to every project. And we love doing that, and it's important to us, and it's led to our success, alhamdulillah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, Tarek.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Great job. I hope everybody's having a good time.
I just make sure my friends come up and ask
Absolutely.
questions.
So I get this question, so I do digital marketing, as you know. So I get this question, maybe I can go to Kickstarter, raise some money, go to LaunchGood, raise some money, go somewhere else, raise some money. All yours.
Okay, great. Yeah, we get this question all the time. We have a policy, we don't allow people to do simultaneous crowdfunding on LaunchGood. So if someone can't have a GoFundMe and a LaunchGood at the same time, because it just causes confusion and dilution. With crowdfunding, you need to focus all of your energies and channel all the people you can in one direction. You're trying to cause a stampede, right? And can you imagine if you're trying to cause a stampede and one person is pushing the crowd this way and another's pushing it this way? There won't be a stampede. And so if you really want to use GoFundMe, then just use it. Don't use LaunchGood because ultimately you're going to hurt yourself. Yeah, we get that a lot. The other misconception is people think that these platforms have marketing, like, again, that there's just this pool of donors waiting to support them. And so an example of that is we're working with, well, actually a great example of that is we worked with an Emirati weightlifter, a female weightlifter, hijabi, and her name was Amna Al-Haddad. And she needed she had some back problems. She had to come to America for treatment to continue her quest for the Olympics. And she went to GoFundMe. She didn't know about LaunchGood. She went to GoFundMe, and after over a month of fundraising there, she only had $80 from 3 people. And we discovered her. Thankfully, and predictably, she's really easy to coach. And we coached her, and she ended up with over 100 donors and over $12,000. She qualified for the Emirati national team, and the female Emirati national team qualified for the Olympics and finished 6th place in the Olympics in Rio this year. So that's an example of the LaunchGood difference for us, alhamdulillah. And that's it. Last thing, it's not up there. Can you go back to my slides, or is that not easy? I had one slide left. I asked Miriam, but I want to ask all of you guys here today to support the Standing Rock campaign. It's launchgood.com/standingrock. Only a few days left. Great campaign. Dustin is running it. And since he's here, I thought it'd be nice to give him a little support. It's not coming up, but that's okay.